All right, welcome everyone to our Lunchtime Learning with Dr. Juanita Simmons in our stopRED. If you will be requesting CLE credit, I will put the course code in the chat. It's 785557. It's also on the flyer. Feel free to ask questions throughout this presentation by either putting your questions in the chat or by taking yourself off mute or by using the emoji to raise your hand. Please do mute yourself unless you're speaking out of respect for our speaker. Um, please help us by taking the survey at the end of the session. It is vital for our grant funding that we get that feedback and also so we can improve future sessions. The recording from today, along with other past sessions, will be available on stopred.org, usually by the end of the week. I do want to take the time to thank our funding source. Funds are made available for this project through the Missouri Department of Public Safety and the Missouri Juvenile Justice Advisory Group from funding provided by the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Simmons, who's back today. Yay!
Good afternoon to everybody and welcome. We're so excited to see you here. And we're just so pleased to present to you today DeMarcus Thomas Brown. I'm seeing so many old friends in the audience, and it's great to just see everybody. I want to acknowledge that Jeff Barlow, the executive director of MJJA, is out in the audience. I hope he can give a wave there. And then I see Justice from our office, and then, of course, Liz and some others. And hopefully, you'll have an opportunity to meet also Dr. Douglas, who's our next coming up speaker. But today, we are honored for DeMarcus Thomas Brown, the Violence Prevention Administrator in the City Manager's Office of the City of Columbia. And he'll present today on preventing youth violence by effective community enrichment. Now, this position may be somewhat new. It's an inaugural position. However, DeMarcus is not new to the efforts and the work to assist youth in our community. He has been the managing director of Enaction and director of Recovery, Support, and Reentry Opportunity Center of Columbia. He is currently serving with Boone County Overdose Response Coalition and so many of our youth assistance programs. He has an MBA, is an ordained minister, a husband, and a father. With great pleasure and honor, I present to you DeMarcus Thomas Brown.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simmons. That was too kind. And one of the last things, I'm going to share my screen here, but one of the last things she did mention was an ordained minister. And so I'm going to follow my notes so that we are timely and it will keep us on a trajectory. So as some of y'all, if any of y'all have been among those who have 2, 3 closings, I will not do that to y'all today. So we will keep it in a professional manner, and we will go through in a didactic form and style. So as Dr. Simmons mentioned, I come to you out of the Office of Violence Prevention as an inaugural office, and one of our tag is building safer communities through collaboration and innovation here in Columbia, Missouri. As she mentioned, this presentation explores events and causes surrounding youth violence. We'll also discuss intervention and prevention strategies to counteract systemic degradation, and we'll get into why I mentioned that. And so, hopefully, it's progress. There we go. Okay, so just a quick introduction of the Office of Violence Prevention. So it was established in 2023 by our mayor and city manager here in Columbia, Missouri. Interesting thing just about that establishment of this office. I personally have known 54 individuals who've died in Columbia, Missouri due to community violence, 9 of them from the years of 2002 to 2015. 44 of them from 2016 to 2025, and then 22 between 2018 and 2020. 7 of them were domestic violence, and 42 of them were classified as what you would say as youth, as our classification of youth is 14 to or excuse me, 14 to 24, which is a wide range, obviously, but the majority of them fell in that range. And so it was a major loss for us here in Columbia, Missouri. Uh, as a catalyst to the office. I was a police chaplain for 5 years and had to relinquish that role as I came into this one just because of conflicts of interest and things that could be present. But when the office was inaugurated, the we had a 3-year-old killed by gun violence here in Columbia. And the mayor said, okay, enough's enough. We need an office of violence prevention. And I was unfortunately on that call as a chaplain, was called to the hospital when this situation happened and had to be there with the family so the police could do what they could do, and was working with the grandparents. The mother and the father were not together, so working on that end to make sure we could keep the peace there, make sure everybody was able to be heard and voice what was going on, and then had to take the parents up to see their dead child in the hospital room as they were done doing the autopsy. And so I say these things to say that it's interesting. I didn't know I'd be working in this office when that happened, but I am not new, unfortunately, to community violence and working within the ins and outs of what has entailed. And so the office really, I am tasked with building the office, and it's tasked with a broader, more comprehensive approach to community violence and public safety, and a community-oriented system of care. We'll get into that later. That orchestrates systemic change by empowering individuals, families, and communities. Right. And obviously evidence-based, data-informed approach to root causes. A lot of people like to talk about the fruit, but my office and what we'll talk about here is the root. Like, what are the root causes? You know, you pick that fruit all day long, you're gonna grow back. But if we can deal with the root, then we can cause the fruit to subside because we've actually dealt with the root. Another way of saying it in the medical field is we got to deal with the disease, not just covering the symptoms that will continue to propagate the disease that will kill you, right? And so we got to deal with the root, and that's what my office is tasked with: is building a continuum of care that deals with these root causes of violence. And so hopefully that was a quick overview. And so we'll go into what's happening. So when we talk about youth violence and community violence that involves youth, we almost have to look into the issues of what's happening with our youth and to that is causing community violence and causing violence among our youth. And so there's two things that we can really pin to, and there's more, but these are really representative of root initiatives that we see among the youth. And this is, while it's evidence-based and it comes through with research, we are actually able to poll our young people and get some of the input from them with these experiences. So dehumanizing experiences, right? This is one where our youth were able to 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 help educate us on what they're going through today. Negative law enforcement engagement. And that's just simply as it sounds. If I engage with law enforcement and it is negative, that begins to support a negative view and relationship with law enforcement. So early onslaught of negative law enforcement engagement is what we would classify as a dehumanizing experience. I am less than because I've been treating as. One of the things in that, and I will try to not belabor all of these, but one of the things in that is when it's all too common that our black and brown males have a situation of being accosted or um unfortunately had violent encounters with law enforcement, whether justified or unjustified. It's all too common. You can sit in a barber shop and you can ask who here has had any kind of a physical altercation with law enforcement, and majority of those in that barber shop would have a story. And now it could be anecdotal that someone's borrowing from someone else, but for the most part, you have old and young who have a semblance of a story and they all look a certain way. And so negative law enforcement engagement is dehumanizing experience. Negative peer engagement. So this is where you're bullying, social media, Instagram. We had an individual, a young person told us that they had an uncle of theirs that was killed, and before they were able to even check with the family, there was a feed on Instagram of their uncle dead against the wall because the group that had done it was claiming that claiming prominence and was sending out these no, it was. And so I am social media ignorant. The young people tell me I am not hip, I am unk, right? They're like, you ain't even. It was Snapchat, excuse me, because it's the one that disappears, right? So it's snaps going around of their dead uncle against the wall as like a trophy, right? So negative peer engagement is a dehumanizing experience because now their experiences, that their care is not valid with their peers. Then obviously the different engagement with their peers as far as bullying, things of that nature. Justice system involvement, early justice system involvement. And so this is not just what we would think of as a troubled youth having involvement with a juvenile officer. This is if I'm 3 years old and I've been taken from my parents, I now have a JO because my parents have now been that I've been taken away from their custody, so I'm given a juvenile officer. It is evidence has shown that even at that 3 years old, the risk or the risk of future incarceration is exponentially higher for that 3-year-old than the 3-year-old that does not have that juvenile officer engagement. So with the justice system involvement, right? So that's widespread, especially when we're looking at Black and brown individuals. So followed while shopping, right? This is another dehumanized experience. This was brought up by young people. If I'm in the mall and I'm followed by the security, they're like, I ain't even done nothing yet. They're like, I just want. We have had those who've not done nothing, and we have had those. That was a true statement. I have not done anything yet. They were planning, but they're like, look, I ain't done nothing yet. And you small. So that just encourages me to kind of to go in with the narrative that has been planted, right? The following while shopping, the not ask if they need help when they actually want to have a poor or no customer service, right? And that even goes into this was being equated even with schooling, right? The teacher not stopping by to see if I need homework or if I need help with the homework, or not even passing out homework because it is assumed that I am not going to have the capabilities to do so. So poor no customer service goes across the board, and we'll talk about why that's the case as well. And then left to die by paramedics. We had a situation where a 9-year-old was shot and died because the parents and the kids that were there could see the ambulance at the top of the street, but because they did not get a sign off perceiving it was unsafe because the majority of the people around looked a certain way, the ambulance did not descend down the street to help that 9-year-old. So the 9-year-old died with a lack of care from the paramedics because of fear of what they perceived as an unsafe situation that was not actually unsafe. So that is dehumanizing. Those youth that are around have now had trauma that has dehumanized their experience because of what they saw. And then community humiliation, which poverty, degradation, all that. It's humiliating when you have young people that would say they want to be dropped off around the corner so that people don't know the street they live on. Not because they don't want people to know where they live, but because they don't want people to make fun of the way they live, where they live, and what their neighborhood looks like. So you have community humiliation, right, as a dehumanized experience. And then coupled with that, we have ignored losses, death of close relatives, right? When you have those young people going to school after they have had a loved one killed on their street or in the community, and it's just treated like the next day you still got to go to school because parents still got to go to work, right? And so the death of close relatives, friends murdered, father or mother hunger. When a father or mother, there could be a domestic dispute, and that kid is going to school the next day, and their father or mother has left the home, and there is no treatment to that individual. And they're just called, you just got to carry on. And we wonder why. Why is Johnny acting out in class? Well, Johnny's dad left yesterday. And we trying to wonder why Johnny's not doing well in the spelling test. Johnny can't think straight because his dad's not there. right? But it's ignored. And so one of the stories was the young person that was at the funeral of their cousin, and no one came to check on him. Everyone went to check on the grandma and the mom, and the he said no one came to ask me if I was okay. Right. And so ignored losses, dehumanizing, that goes into the dehumanizing experience. Uh, deported. When we have deported parents, which we have experienced in our area, and again, those kids are going back to school, living with someone else at best, and there's no care to, as they feel, no care to their situation. Parental divorce, frequent relocations. We got to move here because the landlord wouldn't fix this. We called in on them. They told us they're going to move us somewhere else, or we got evicted, what have you. No fault of their own, but frequent relocations. And then, last but not least, literacy or lack of educational advancement, where that young person can mourning the loss of I can't read and I'm 11 years old. Right. These things, I don't understand these tables, these timetables. You keep handing me this paper. And so I'm going to act out because I do not want to look like I'm illiterate. And so those are ignored losses because we look at a behavior versus what is going on with that young person. I keep trying to advance with the keys. There we go. So what does that cause, right? And so what's the impact if we have ignored losses and we have and this picture, I could tell you, I could do a whole didactic about Black Panther. I mean, that Ryan Coogler did a fantastic job on lining out a whole systemic approach and a experience that a group of people have had to come through. And so this picture here is this character Killmonger who has essentially set the village aflame, right? And has gone through things. And so post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And so trauma, all those things, the as it says, humanizing experience plus the ignored losses equal rage and the potential for heavy substance use and violence. Right. I have been dehumanized and I have been ignored. And so I am enraged as a young person, right? As a youth, because I have these experiences and I don't feel heard, I don't feel seen, I don't feel listened to. So I am enraged. And so we also can call that post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Trauma, the very definition of trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing event that significantly impacts a person's emotional, psychological, and physical well-being. The effects of trauma vary widely from person to person, but may include, and this is interesting, and I think this is important, what we sometimes can miss: emotional distress, anxiety, depression, anger, physical symptoms, headaches, insomnia, night terrors. You know how many young people have talked about night terrors? They can't sleep, and when they do fall asleep, they are abruptly woken up by night terrors because of post-traumatic stress disorder. Cognitive difficulties, concentrating, flashbacks, focusing and hyper focusing. So if I'm sitting in class as a young person and I saw a loved one shot and killed or stabbed or hanged, as we have some of those, that ain't stopped. We have some of these, or brutality. We see George Floyd replaying, and I'm sitting in class and they can't understand why I can't focus on chemistry because I'm replaying this traumatic event, and now I'm labeled as a problem child because I cannot get out of my head the replications of the situation and it's trauma, but we label, right? And we deal with an action versus trying to reach that individual and help them process their trauma. So cognitive difficulties, behavioral, right? Avoidance, substance use disorder, risky and hazardous behaviors, right? Those things come from post-traumatic stress disorder. Interpersonal relationships dysfunction. So domestic disputes, that's a big one for us here in Colombia. A lot of our homicides, especially as of recent, have been interpersonal. Domestic disputes that they were not able to cope with. And so you have friend or loved one killing friend or loved one. And those are all symptoms, like textbook DSM-5 symptoms of trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, acute, chronic, and complex. And then when we roll all this in with this quote we have here, sanctuary trauma, those who are supposed to care inflict pain. And so therefore, the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Sanctuary trauma is huge. It operates in a different function for our young people. And this is going on. So youth are living and functioning in hypervigilant survival mode. Right. And with that, homicide and suicide are now the leading causes of death among children and young adults, particularly among youth of color. The rate of firearm deaths for Black youth is 20 times higher than for white youth. And half of all cases where a minor commits a violent crime, the victim is also a minor. Beyond direct physical harm and mortality, community violence severely impacts youth in the following ways, right? Trauma and brain development. So witnessing it, I'll just read the note because I want to jump off key, but I won't. So witnessing or experiencing violence or having close friends or family members victimized produces deep trauma and vicarious trauma in children. These traumatic experiences negatively impact young people's brain function and can cause depression, behavioral challenges, academic disruption, and delinquency. Long-term mental and physical health, adolescents experiencing exposed to violence are facing unprecedented mental health challenges. The trauma from adverse childhood experiences. It was interesting. We met with the children's division here locally, and a situation happened, and my concern in the situation was that we were causing harm. We were causing adverse childhood experiences that happened to these young people, and these children were 3 and 1, and I said we are causing harm to them, and the caseworkers looked at me and they said, what are ACEs? I almost flipped the table. I said, I said, adverse childhood experiences? No, that's not ringing a bell. I said, how are y'all casework? So the administrator said, well, can you come back and talk to my team about adverse childhood experiences? And I did because they need to know. But I was like, that is not, y'all ought to be ashamed of yourself that y'all caseworkers don't know what adverse childhood experiences are. So they gathered the caseworkers. Most of their clientele, most of the ones that Children's Division here locally are dealing with, 65% of those that they're dealing with are Black. You know how many caseworkers they had that were Black? Thank you, Liz. Zero. They didn't have any Black caseworkers. None. No black. How you not got no Black caseworkers? 65% of your clientele are Black. You have no, and you don't know about ACEs. We are probably causing harm. We are probably causing harm, and so uh, ACEs, like community violence, significantly elevates the risk for self-harm, family conflict, anxiety, and alcohol and drug misuse. The psychological toll of these traumatic environments also leads to much higher rates of poor health outcomes in adulthood, including heart disease and cancer. I was trying to tell these caseworkers there's no takebacks from this. You are inflicting things, and if you don't rewind and start doing things that are going to look at the children that are involved, you are going to inflict things that you can't take back. So y'all will be culpable. That didn't move them very much, but we still tried. And last but not least, social and justice system consequences. Youth navigating community violence often struggle with educational frustration, dropping out of school, a lack of future orientation, and difficulties expressing or managing their emotions. When unaddressed, trauma leads to involvement in the juvenile justice system. It negatively alters the entire trajectory of a young person's life. Compared to diverted youth, those who are formally processed by the justice system are more likely to be rearrested and incarcerated, engage in future violence, and achieve lower school graduation rates and hold a lower perception of future opportunity. And so when we talk about forlorn future, which is a byproduct of post-traumatic stress disorder, when you ask a kid, why would you do something that could potentially take your life? They will tell you, I don't have a life that's worth living, so why should I care about my life or yours either? Right? That is a forlorn future. And we say, oh, these kids are violent. No, they are traumatized, and we're not dealing with the trauma. So that's part of this side of the impact, right? And we'll get to some positive nature here with community enrichment. You wouldn't believe how many people don't believe in community enrichment. They don't believe that communities can be enriched where degradation has happened. We can actually go and reinvest and enrich to bring about a different future, a flourishing and one that causes the whole community to thrive. People who should understand this do not understand community enrichment. And so we must treat the lake, not blame the fish, right? It's crazy to pull a fish out of a polluted lake and be like, this fish is bad. Can y'all believe how polluted this fish is? And we just gonna take this fish and throw it away, lock it up, throw away the key, and this is going to fix the society. And then we go back in there, we pull another fish out. I was like, can you believe this fish is polluted? We're gonna throw away this fish and lock it up, throw away the key, and we not. And then we go and we say, okay, these fish must just be garbage animals because they just keep being polluted. And so this must be a fish problem. No, it's a lake. It's the atmosphere. It's a lake problem. We have a degraded lake, and we must treat the lake, not blame the fish for being in the pollute. Or one of the questions I have, and I continue to ask as we talk about youth, is: Are youth the canaries in the mine shaft of our national environment? We talk about youth, but are they connect? Are they we don't blame the bird dying in the mine shaft. We say, wait, there are chemicals in this mine that are going to kill us as well if we don't get out, because this bird is not capable of holding in the amount of degradation that's coming, that they're breathing in. And so this is telling us early signs that there's something that's really plaguing us as a whole. But we're seeing it with the canaries. I believe youth are the same way. We're seeing youth are not capable because of the lack of development in the mind and different things. They're not capable of holding what adults can try to muster through. And so we really ought to look at them as the canaries and say there's something that's plaguing us, but the youth are the telltale. They're telling us the early signs of what should be signs for us as adults as well. And so that's my question or hypothesis I hang around is where people are like, oh, it's the youth. Well, the youth didn't just get here by themselves. And when we talk about violence, and I'll say this and leave it alone, but we live in a violent society. And we've normalized violence in ways. I mean, think about the current war, right? We're annihilate these people. We're doing all this stuff is said from platforms that are socially acceptable, and we're mad at the rapper who's talking about doing the same thing on a lower tier, but it's okay to do it on a larger scale. So I can do this to a country, but I can't do this to my dude across the street. We live in a violence, and we parade and we uplift violence, but we don't like it when it affects us in a negative way. But we like it when it gets us a result that we want. That's not okay. Violence is violence. And so we have people who will say one side they don't want violence, but on the other side they like violence. No, we got to actually be together that we don't want any violence because it affects us. If you're a communal people, violence affects us all. So poverty is the greatest predictor of violent crime and overarching community degradation. Therefore, addressing community violence starts in the community with community enrichment as a long-term goal and solution. And so this is just a slide here, the High Line. I had the privilege of being able to visit the High Line. It's a beautiful place. Didn't used to be. So the lore is that 500 people were killed. It used to be a train track. People get hit by trains, drug overdose, different things, drug poisoning, excuse me, different things there. And then they decided, hey, we should do something with this. And they turned it into a park. And they have 8 million visitors a year. And it is a beautiful place. It's an enriching place. You feel fulfilled when you're there and all that. But what it used to be was a kill center. And so that's community enrichment, right? The change of the neighborhood because they had to invest. That costs money. That costs time. That costs initiative and strategic onslaught to be able to produce the High Line. But before it was an eyesore in a degraded place in New York City. So we look at the social determinants of health, and such as poverty, education, neighborhood quality, and chronic stress, can affect DNA primarily through DNA methylation. This is crazy to me. I mean, and we haven't scratched the surface on epigenetics and all that goes on there. But this is insane to me that my nurture can affect my DNA, right? Like that if I'm exposed to some of this is why and this is not just, conspiracy theories. Some people are like, where you get this is literally you got the World Health Organization, you got a whole organization that is devoted to genetics, epigenetics, and methylation of DNA. And this is not hoax. This is like really, I mean, it's we have breakthrough research and we're just at the surface. These environmental factors do not change the underlying DNA sequence, but alter how genes are expressed effectively, embedding social experiences into biological function. And so we have the social determinants of health here, and I won't belabor, but economic stability. And we know those are, I mean, we're talking about poverty and income level, employment and job security, housing stability and energy costs, food security and access to affordable, healthy food, right? That's economic stability, education, and what some people will do is they'll boil down the social determinants of health to five when there's actually seven because access and and quality are not the same. Because there's access to education does not mean it is quality education. And so they built out that quality education. So I have access, Ruby Bridges, right? I got access to a school, but I got to walk across these train tracks to get to the school. That is not quality of education access. That's just access. I need quality. I should not have to walk across these train tracks to almost get hit by a train and walk past this and trip up. So I need quality, right? And then healthcare access is not the same as having the quality of healthcare access. I need doctors that understand me, look like me, can understand what I'm going through. I remember one time growing up, I went to a dermatologist and and I had eczema. Well, this dermatologist, this was in Kirksville, Missouri, didn't understand the way things work and did not know what moisturizing would do for someone of my hue. And so they could not understand what was going on with my skin. It took my grandmother to say, "Boy, all you need is some Vaseline and some lotion. That's gonna take that right on." The dermatologist couldn't get me there. We was doing skin grafts, all kind of stuff, and my girl was like, This is why because she knew, she understood, she knows what I look. We have a similar experience, and so even though this person was trained by a university, could not get to what my grandmother could get to because of lived experience. Right. So quality of access. If you think, and we know all the Tuskegee experiments. I mean, you go through the history of our nation, black people have higher pain tolerance. That's not true. We have the mortality of women in childbirth of black women. Healthcare access is not quality of healthcare access. And so that's a social determinant of health. And it leads to trauma if we do not give quality of healthcare access. Right. And education is the same. I remember going to a school where they told me they were just buying time so I could go to jail like the rest of my relatives went to jail. I had a teacher tell me that. And they wondered why we didn't like school. We were told that we were subpar. And I don't think that was the initiative of the whole school system, but that was the initiative of that individual teacher. And we were adhered to that very initiative. And so, neighborhood and built environment, right? This is housing quality and safety, air and water quality. And we remember Flint, Michigan, right? We got people who couldn't even have drinking water, right? Lead in the walls, right? Lead paint and all that, asbestos in buildings. We're talking about air and quality access, access to healthy, affordable food, access to transportation and community infrastructure. Do I got sidewalks in my neighborhood, or do I got to walk in the street and risk getting hit? We had a kid, well, it was Sunday. A kid got hit. A 9-year old, no, she was 8. 8-year old got hit Sunday in a neighborhood called Demerit here in Columbia, playing outside. Got hit, and it was a hit and run. People pulled off and left. Now, as an 8-year old, if I go, that's trauma, and I hope that she processes that so it does not become post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And so that's quality. Why do these babies not have no sidewalks and green space to play? Why are they playing on the street? Right. And that's built environment. And so again, that begins to manipulate your DNA. And so that 8-year old's child could be born afraid to go outside. Why would that 8-year-old child, when she gets older, be afraid to go outside because of the very trauma that her mother has passed down to her, and now she don't want to go outside. So now we got to deal with pro-social activities because they have a semblance of wanting to be alone and all that. And this is the understanding of when we're talking about youth violence, we got to deal with trauma. We got to deal with trauma. And so I have one of my favorite Disney teachings on nurture is a Megamind. If you haven't seen, I got kids, so we watch the films. But Megamind was fantastic because at the beginning you have two of these individuals who both came from superhero parents. One went to a rich house and was had all the stuff that they needed to a great school and all that. The other one went to a prison, landed in the prison as a baby, and was nurtured by prisoners. Went to the same school. The other individual bullied the other one, and it's funny in the movie they put in the blue guy who ends up being the villain was told by his parents as they sent them off as their planet was destroyed. Both of them had trauma, right? Planets was destroyed, parents were destroyed. His parents said, "You are built for greatness," but his nurture made him a villain. And so he was the villain at school. He was misunderstood. All his people from his planet are blue and have heads like that. But because he came to a different planet where people don't look like him, they could not receive him as their own as a child, but he was received by prisoners. So he becomes a villain, right? This is like just the archetype of social determinant of health in a Pixar, I think it's Disney Pixar movie, right? And we see that with kids, we got to deal with the trauma, right? The uh, adverse childhood experiences, positive childhood experiences, we deal with both to improve daily living conditions and the circumstances in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age. We got to tackle the inequitable distribution of power, money, and resources, the structural drivers of those conditions of daily life. For example, macroeconomics and urbanization policies and governance. We got to look at those. We can't just look. The juvenile justice system is not going to fix those things. It's not, and it's not tasked to. So that's it. Yes. So how do we get to youth flourishing, and how do we combat trauma, right? What do we do to get there? And so and the tag for this session was the village, right? You're looking at the village, the community violence intervention ecosystem. It takes a village, it takes an ecosystem, right? To combat what systemically has been cast down. And now we have generations, right, who have manipulated DNA because of traumatic experiences and social determinants of health and lived experiences. So it takes this whole ecosystem. And so in the ecosystem, we have everything there, and I'll go through with some of them, but the holistic approach is the trauma-informed, community-oriented system of care, a holistic wraparound approach to both intervention and prevention that is informed by the overarching framework that recognizes the widespread impact of trauma and understands how trauma can affect an individual's health, behavior, and overall well-being. To effectively intervene and prevent youth violence, communities must shift away from relying solely on juvenile justice system and instead implement a comprehensive continuum of care, a collaborative and synergistic approach to community care. And developing and building ecosystems of change and enrichment that can lead to flourishing and thriving individually, and hopefully it leads to community flourishing and thriving. So the ecosystem components got street outreach and violence interruption, right? And that's employing those who are able to do conflict mediation, mentorship, and an immediate connection to services. They use and some of this we use hotspots. We still use hotspot mapping here when we're looking at where we should prioritize resources in various neighborhoods, because people always ask, well, if we're doing that here, why are we not doing that here? Well, the hotspot mapping or GIS mapping shows us when we overlay, some of the social determinants of health, educational access, and different things of that nature, food access, canopy mapping, right? Hotspots, all that. It shows us the areas, and then obviously the police calls and the data there show us that, okay, these are impacted areas. These are where we need to focus. So street outreach and violence interruption, deploying credible messengers and mentorship, connecting with youth, So the credible messengers, such as street outreach workers, life coaches, or adults who have transformed their lives, is a powerful intervention tool. And I'll caveat here, the evidence has shown us that it's not just those who have been incarcerated. We need those who did not go through incarceration, but started off in a de-invested neighborhood, was able to work their way through and then come back to impact those who are still, and so that they don't think that my path to success goes through the Department of Corrections. That's what happens. Evidence-based shows us. Now we need those who are involved with Department of Corrections or involved with juvenile justice, to have those who are also have been involved with juvenile justice or Department of Corrections to help bring them through. But if they have not been, it hurts them to get those who are gone through incarceration to reach those who have not been impacted by the justice system. They need people who came through and did not go through the justice system, so they can see actual mentors that segue them from the system. What happens is the system knows, if I can get people that go through the justice system, I'll just get a pipeline of those who mean to care to bring people still through the justice system. And so we got to be careful there. And so making sure that it actually makes up those who are needed, right? If the individuals are just scuffing up and just need people to help them get through, and they have not been justice impacted, give them folks who've made it through, right? And give them the doctors, the lawyers, give them the business owners, give them those who have an occupation, the one who gets up and goes to work every day and takes care of their kids. Give them those as mentors, not those who have been justice impacted, unless that is their trajectory they're on. So difference between prevention and intervention there. Victim services in youth diversion. States and communities should establish early intervention networks that enable youth and families to access help without involving the justice system. This includes providing safe places for youth to go, and when they need help, offering alternatives to police during behavioral crisis, and establishing systems for accessing needs and facilitating warm handoffs to free, culturally competent services. And so cognitive intervention. If I don't know, and I've had relatives that don't know, I need somebody. We've heard of Sherpas, right? We need a Sherpa. I don't want somebody who studied what's the mountain in Nepal that studied the mountain. Should give me any mountain. I don't want to climb none of them. but I don't need Mount Kilimanjaro. I don't need somebody who studied Mount Kilimanjaro. I need somebody who actually knows how to live on the mountain, knows how to get up, can get me there and get me back, right? That's a Sherpa. That's what they do. We need life Sherpas. I've been there, been through the neighborhoods, and I can show you how to traverse and get to what you need without having to have these run-ins with law enforcement and things, and to be able to get to bring results of flourishing through cognitive behavioral, what we say cognitive behavioral therapy, but cognitive behavioral intervention, right? And counseling. We need those who have parented their kids and are single moms to help those who are coming through saying, I don't think I can do this because I'm a single mom. No, let me show you, right? Let me walk you through this process. And so we need that cognitive behavioral intervention. We talk about habilitation. All right, what does that look like? If it's not rehabilitating is saying I've been there and I need to get put back in that place. Habilitation is saying I ain't never seen it, right? And so I need to now have measures to get me to a place I've never been. And I'll hurry through that because I want to make sure we get to a last component. Crisis management wraparound services. That's again 24 to 72 hours after a shooting has happened, after something has happened. So we're able to get into the life of that child. That child sees someone shot and killed. 24 hours later, somebody's talking to that child and saying, hey, talking to a youth saying, hey, what happened? How can we help? What did you see? Helping them process that, not sending them back to school. Somebody be able to go to the school system and the teacher say, hey, we need 3 days. Why? Because this kid just saw someone get shot, or this loved one just got shot, or this kid's mother left, or father left. We need 3 days for us to get in front of and get crisis management for them and the family so that they can show up their best self on Monday or Tuesday versus sending them right back to school and having teachers that don't know how to deal with them and label them. So we got to have crisis management and wraparound services, right, for them and the family in order to impact that. And case managers provide trauma-informed assessments, connect participants to behavioral health, substance use treatment if needed, housing stabilization. Do we need to move y'all? What's going on? All that so that they're not worried about that. Can you imagine as a 11, 12, 16-year-old, you at school thinking, well, they shot at my house yesterday. I may go back home to them shoot. I'm not thinking about no curriculum or lesson or lunch. My stomach's in knots because I'm worried about if they're gonna shoot when I get back home. Right? So we got to have crisis management and wraparound services involved within 24 to 72 hours. It also has been founded to segue retaliation because you're able to get in front of both those who are shooting and those who are being shot at, right? And to alleviate family conflict and things of that nature. So a new type of, if you will, focus deterrent. School-based violence intervention. These are programs where schools are able to implement social emotional learning programs to teach empathy and conflict resolution while replacing punitive suspensions with restorative justice practices that keep youth engaged in school. Right. And so I got more on that, but I won't, we'll hurry through here. Neighborhood stabilization and violence prevention activities. Youth are highly influenced by their physical environment, highly influenced. I mean, this is why we talk about the nurture of it, right? Social determinants of health. If they see blight and violence, they are more likely to engage in such behavior. Creating safe third spaces, such as well-funded community centers and after-school programs, provide youth with positive recreation activities. Additionally, environmental interventions, such as maintaining vacant properties, making these landlords take care of their properties. You will not believe. Well, yeah, I think I'm among friends. Y'all would believe where you go to these properties like this area of town is a blight. Well, they don't even own the property here. These people are renting. Where are these landlords at? Well, we can't make landlords miss me with that. Y'all can't make y'all. They need to take care of their property. It's the whole. We have all kind of psychological evaluations and things on this nature. This is why visiting teams, when they come to the home team, they locker rooms all jacked up, and they ain't got all the stuff that the home team has because they want them to have a psychology of losing. When our neighborhoods are blighted and we don't own the property, they should make these landlords fix up their property. It's not on the tenant, it's the landlord. But we hide behind the shadow because they had the money and they're the donors and all this to these political schemes. We don't make them fix it up, and then we wonder why violence is going on. But we pointing at the person who is being enacted on, who is at most who is being preyed on, not the ones who are doing the praying. And so that we gotta get these programs where these vacant properties and greening lots and deploying community navigation liaisons to de-escalate conflicts, public to come before council and to come before legislation and say, look, they got to do something about this. Y'all got to do something about this. You know, we got to have those voices, and that will help youth create a safer overall environment for them to live and play. Right. And so, oh, I think I might have time. Where is this working? Pierce County Juvenile Court. Y'all, I went out to Pierce County. Never heard of Pierce County, by the way, until we went and did a visit. I'm gonna stop share to reshare real quick. We did a visit to Pierce County, and what we found was they revamped their juvenile court system. And Pierce County juvenile court system is achieving 88% reduction in youth detention by focusing on community-based alternatives. And this is in Washington, excuse me. This is Tacoma, Washington is the seat of Pierce County. And it neighbors King County, which would be Seattle. And so they use community-based alternatives, evidence-based practices in reducing reliance on secure pre-adjudication detention. It's called intervention, right? So they what are the quotes? And will this let me cycle through? There we go. So Pierce County Juvenile Court strategic objectives: agency culture and leadership. And what amazed me is they said, look, we didn't touch any external until we could deal with internal. And so the quote I have from their internal, their their administrator, I believe is her title. We had to set a focus that our internal goal was to combat systemic racism in the systems that support the status quo of its advancement. Internal. And so their leadership principles, they made internal goals, and you see them there: agency, culture, leadership, equity, and inclusion. They made the internal goal of collaboration across departments for the flourishing of their most at-risk clients. So they had to deal with that internal. They said people had to find a off-ramp because they were not going to stay. But internally, they had to deal with these things with Pierce County Juvenile Court. All right. And so trauma informed, as we talked about it, we see that there was four in their strategic objectives. We will reduce the likelihood that children and families experience further trauma while going through the court process. In addition, the agency and individual employees will learn strategies to help manage secondary and vicarious trauma, aka adverse childhood experiences. They knew about adverse childhood experiences. I'm not sure how yeah, anyway, so that was a bedrock for them. And then the results will make a measurable contribution to the health, safety, and well-being of children and families in Pierce County. So their results were external focusing, not internal. A lot of agencies will say, well, we got this to do, and they're not focused on the external, on those families in those areas. And so this is what Pierce County decided to underscore. And then we talked about their internal collaboration, there was no fiefdoms, right? They had to break down those walls of fiefdoms between probation and detention and support, and the clerks in the courts, and the fiscal and IT independence, right? They broke all that down. So we got to function as one. That's why they had the circle. We cannot have these fiefdoms where we're trying to do good work over here in probation, and then we get to the courts and they're like, oh, we don't care what work y'all doing over here. Y'all don't run nothing over here. So we're gonna build this wall and we're gonna take you all the way back through. They lose community trust and they lose buy-in when they did not have internal collaboration. And so that's why they developed the leadership principles and the practice all the way through. And they kept reiterating some people needed an off-ramp because they were not willing to work within what was going on for the betterment of the youth in Pierce County. And so they made those goals: lead boldly together to create a healthy culture and transform lives. And that didn't work. I'll go by this really quickly. This was the total population of Pierce County. As you can see, is a pretty populous area. And just the orange here tells you there were 1,267 young people accounted for in their probation system, right? Juvenile justice system. 2,405 referrals. So there were 1,138 referrals that the Pierce County juvenile courts had no capacity to serve. So they were showing us that, look, we don't have it all pegged down and right. We still have capacity issues. And so the booking referrals were those referrals from like Children's Division or have you, like pre-referral. So it wasn't somebody did something and they were coming through policing. It was, hey, we think so-and-so's neglected, or so-and-so yelled at the teacher, and the teachers think the school system thinks they may need some further watching or something like that. But 2,405 of those. But then we see the distribution of their cases throughout, and I won't have you on that. This is an interesting slide. Here is a population. So in 2000, this is what discouraged me when I was out there, y'all, is that in 2000 obviously they had 163 youth detained in detention. 2004, that's when they said, hey, we got to do something different. So they've been on this trajectory for a minute, right? So I was kind of dejected when I was like, man, y'all started this in 2004. We ain't got no chance. But 2004, they said the introduction to the JDIA, which is the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative. They said we got to do something different. Like there's no way. I mean, they had these juveniles detained. They showed us the old quarters. It was like they were in, just bunks, like they were in prison. And they said, this is not working. And just all the way around. Right. And so what they did then is they developed a change internal. 2012 is when they developed what they called the Applied Leadership Network. And that's what I love it. YSAN, which is the Youth System Action Network that encompasses over 30 organizations and youth services outside of the juvenile courts division. These are community-based organizations that work within families, that work within to bring a holistic approach, right? A continuum of care. And we see I mean, it's ridiculous. You see the numbers draw down. They were showing us they were even able to repurpose their facilities because they didn't need them. Like the numbers went, and the adult status was those who, as y'all well know, are being who had been qualified as adults, and so they were holding them until obviously the age of 18. And this is why, and some of the slides didn't pan out, but why probation transformation, partnering with the research community, engaging and partnering with families. Love that. We need to partner with the families, right? What's going on with the family, holistic support, expand continuum of interventions. And they showed us a lot of those. It was fantastic. Increase positive youth development, not punitive, positive. Cultivate community partnerships and build capacity to serve deep end youth in Pierce County. Deep end youth were those who were going to be there for a while, right? That's those who had a murder charge, those who had, any kind of thing. They're going to be there 15 years or more. That was deep end youth, and they made that's their most at risk. Right. And then probation transformation highlights, we see that there. I won't belabor, but one thing I will point out is the opportunity-based probation. My goodness, if y'all have a chance to look into that, that transformed the way they did probation. You have they developed pre-probation, and then you have initial probation. All they did was they dealt with intervention and prevention. We can prevent, and we do prevention with probation, but their most gross came from intervention with probation. We got to intervene in these situations. And so opportunity-based probation had the understanding, and they work with this through we need to incentivize our youth because they respond to positivity way more than they respond to negativity and to punitive initiation. And so that was fantastic. I could not say enough about Pierce County. And I will stop share there. And this is just my landing slide here. So that is all I have, y'all. Thank y'all for the time. That is my contact information there. And I appreciate just the ability to have this session over lunch with y'all.
DeMarcus, excellent presentation. Thank you so much on behalf of MJJA. I had to jump in and thank you myself. Thank you.
Wow, you're very welcome.
Liz, do we have some comments from the floor before we do our closeout?
I think people probably read them. We're good.
We want to thank you all. Everybody, this is just a hand clap. This was phenomenal. You spoke on a number of things that we have attempted to address. And for those of you who have missed some of the early cultural awareness training, and you want to know more about the epigenetic trauma, generational trauma, we do have recorded slides from that included some of that in the training. We're so excited that you're here. Mr. Thomas Brown, you were fantastic. We're just so grateful that you're here. I see Dr. Nate Stevens, who has been one of our advisors for restorative justice. So many of you, I hope that Dr. Lucy Douglas, who is our upcoming speaker, is somewhere in the audience. I can't see all of the names, but do know that she's going from what he has talked about into specifics, the voices of the young people as a responding crisis counselor. And here's Dr. Lucy Douglas, who will be our next presenter. And so what she's doing is like cascading upon what he has talked about, but getting into the specifics of their direct stories and her experiences on the crisis line and working with them as a trauma counselor and crisis counselor. I'm trying to rush through. Liz, I know that you want to talk about the evaluations. Jeff, thanks for your comments. Have we missed anybody? I saw Michelle Young. I don't know whether this is a Michelle from UCEA, University Council of Educational Administrators, but Liz, we'll just give it to you. I'm just overjoyed with this phenomenal presentation. Thank you so much.
I must real quick jump in and say Dr. Nate Stevens is the reason we're able to do the work we do in Columbia. The work that he did here is unparalleled. When you talk about youth intervention and prevention, we've not seen anything like it, and we miss him desperately. So it makes sense that he would be involved with this.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. What a small, small world. So thanks so much for attending the sessions today. Please take the survey. I did put the link in the chat there. I also put the link to if you'd like to register for Dr. Lucy Douglas's presentation next month on April 29th. Do you see me? Do you hear me? You can sign up there. While you are there, check out our Making Connections blog so that you can start a dialogue with Dr. Simmons. Also, check out our spring educational conference. Our registration has opened, and that will be in St. Louis, May 20th through the 22nd. Registration is available on mjja.org under events, so be sure and check that out. We have lots of great speakers. We're going to be announcing them hopefully later this week and next week. And thanks so much for joining us today. We hope to see you next month. And really thank you, DeMarcus Thomas Brown, for I think what's going to stick with me is the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much. Teresa, I saw my sister Teresa in there. I thought maybe we need to chat about the March Madness. So I'll have to text you.
There's Nate. Hey, Nate. Good
Hey,
to see
Nate.
you.
Thank you. Oh, there you are, Teresa. Hey,
There's
you're
Teresa.
dealing with March Madness too, huh? Nate, what's going on?
I just wanted to take a second from writing and researching and grading papers.